Wouldn't you like to go back to the future when it comes to West Ham, you know, when they had great players playing for them and they were actually quite entertaining to watch? But, of course, this is not a football show, but what we're talking about here is going back to the future in lots of ways, because I'm not at all surprised that Sheffield University have come out with a study this week in which it says that a lot of young people in their 20s and 30s are actually more kind of, shall we say, aware and more sympathetic and more encouraged by listening to people talking about Margaret Thatcher's policies than they are about Jeremy Corbyn's. And there's a reason for that, because actually Jeremy Corbyn doesn't have any policies.
He doesn't have any policies,
right.
That's true. But I can't believe this. I don't remember talking to anyone in that age group in their early 20s who ever said a good thing about Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
I think they've been so drummed into them.
We were being told, there's a show that I don't watch, is it Celebrity First Dates or First Dates or something? There was somebody
something
on
like
it
that
this week who was young, in his 20s.
And he was a fan.
And he was a political geek, and he bored the backside off the woman he was trying to chat up by going on and on about how great Margaret Thatcher was.
Maybe it's going full circle. I mean, sort of like, you know, look, for me, she was a heroine. I mean, whether you agree with her policies or not, I was a young girl going to school, and suddenly we had a female Prime Minister.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. I mean, I think she was strong.
And I mean, it has to be pointed out at this stage that the Labour Party have yet still to have a female leader of the party.
Exactly, quite.
They haven't
the Party
managed
of Equality.
That yet. The Party of Equality, the Party of Misogyny is what I like to call it.
I think when they get a Jewish female leader, then we'll be happy.
Then we'll be happy. Let's talk to Matteo Bergamini, who is the CEO of Shoutout UK. He's a guy that follows trends in young people's voting patterns and also in young people's beliefs and all of that. Matteo, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Morning.
Hi, Matteo.
Morning. Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, I don't know whether you've noticed the change in people's attitudes, in young people's attitudes, or whether they're looking back at what they might not know was a very difficult period for Britain in terms of its policies and its politics and its kind of, you know, rich and poor scenarios, or whether this is a kind of a bit of an anomaly, this study.
I would say it's a bit of it's not so much an anomaly. It's more around how history looks at political leaders. I mean, we mentioned before, I think your colleague mentioned it before, you know, that she was the first female prime minister this country's had.
Yeah.
And if you think of Margaret Thatcher, you know, you think of the idea of this Iron Lady, this strong person that brought Britain through some very dark times.
Yeah.
History looks very favourably to her. So if you consider that, it's not that much of a shock that young people that didn't live through when she was in power or very young, when she was still alive, see her through the sort of lens of history as opposed to actually being there and the sort of emotions that were being driven by people that really hated her or really loved her at the time. So for young people, it's more like a historical figure that just brought Britain through a dark time. And for me, it actually kind of makes sense that those same young people end up voting for someone like Jeremy Corbyn, not because of the policy differences, but more because he's also representing someone that is fighting for young people. Whether you agree with that or not is a different story, but he's representing someone that sees that this next generation is going through a horrific period. We can't buy houses, the economy, etc. And he's trying to do something about that. And that's the sort of persona that he's putting forward.
You do know, as you are talking to somebody, and both of us, I suppose, children of Thatcher, how ridiculous it sounds when you say, you know, it's awful, we can't buy houses. You know, I mean, when we grew up in the 70s, you couldn't buy a railway ticket because the trains were on strike. You couldn't buy a car because it was too expensive. You know, never mind buying a house. She made it possible for people to buy houses who had never been even able to think about property.
Oh, I'm sure. You know, with the right to buy and so forth, with the council houses thing. I mean, yeah, that was one of her policies. Probably one of the most famous, I'd say.
Yeah, well, indeed. And I think one of the reasons why young people perhaps are quite in admiration of her is because she did make it possible for people. I mean, by far and away, the common sort of wheel was very much in favour of Margaret Thatcher when she was in power, and that's why she won so many elections, because she did help so many people. I mean, Britain was a very, very class-riven society in the 1970s. You know, you could not get a job in the stock market if you were not the son of a stockbroker. You could not get a job in the City of London if you hadn't gone to public school. You know, she opened all that up with a big bang.
You couldn't buy a house. You could not buy a house.
You could not get on the property ladder. There was no chance of you. There was no social mobility whatsoever under the previous Labour government, and she made all of that possible. And I think that's what people now look at, because people now see a time when maybe we've gone back a bit to that kind of social mobility problem.
I mean, I don't think there's maybe. I think that there's definitely that. We've definitely gone back to that. You know, there was a period, especially, for example, in my parents' day, just a generation ago, where you could buy, for example, a house or a flat, and you could get on with your life in a reasonable way, whereas now it's almost impossible for a young person to get on the property ladder, for example.
Yeah, but that's not the end of the world, is my point, Matteo. I mean, people obsess about this, and it's a very middle-class obsession,
It is the one thing that's always brought up by this generation.
It's the millennials' obsession is I can't buy a house.
But it's a problem.
Well, I mean, to be honest, Matteo, it's not. Because for generations and for decades, we all managed to live quite happily, renting accommodation, never owning anything.
My parents, my grandparents, they couldn't afford to buy houses.
Of course, exactly. And that's where we came from.
It's
not like a human right. It's not a human right, though, is it?
No, but we live in one of the richest countries in the world, and if it's a problem that we can resolve, which it is, we should be looking to resolve that.
All right. How do we resolve it then, Matteo?
Well, you can build more, for example.
That's not going to drop the price, though, is it?
Well, if there's more supply, of course.
No, it won't. Don't talk rubbish. You can't just build houses and expect the prices to drop in Kensington or in Birmingham or in Manchester. It's just not going to happen.
I mean, not Kensington, of course not, but there are other places that you can build. I mean, the point is that it is an issue. And if you look at, for example, the idea of rent, if you look at the example, for example, of real wages, where wages haven't gone up in relation to the cost of stuff, so your pound goes less than what it used to.
I think because you didn't live in the 70s, you really have nothing to compare poverty to. You know, when we grew up, we had nothing. We literally had nothing. We had no shops that you could buy avocados in. You know, we had no ability to buy foreign cars. If you could buy any car and keep it for maybe 12 years, you were lucky.
We couldn't afford a car.
No, I mean, we didn't always have a car when I was a kid. You know, you didn't have foreign holidays all the time. You couldn't just jet off to, the Far East whenever you felt like it, or America or Florida. You couldn't do any of those things. It was like living in the dark ages, Matteo.
Well, it was, because you had electric strikes
as well. And there was also power cuts. There was also power cuts quite frequently.
It was the dark ages.
I'm sure, but it's a different generation with different issues. I mean, with all due respect, you're not a young person that currently starting your career at this time. So, like I was.
No, but I do know some young people, Matteo. I don't just hang about with a lot of old gits,
I'm not an old git, Mike. Thank you.
Very harsh. I didn't mean present company accepted, of course.
But what I'm saying is that different generations have different issues, and like I'm saying, it's different now for young people. And there are different issues.
It's a lot easier, though, Matteo, for young people.
Really
I can promise you that. I've got kids who are going through exactly what you're describing, starting off in the workplace, leaving university. Many people in my generation didn't go to university because they couldn't afford to, or because they didn't want to, or because they just had to get a job because that was the only way they could get. The family needed their money and their financial input. I think you have to put that into massive perspective. The fact that you can't get a house, the fact that you're only getting paid $30,000 instead of $40,000. These are minuscule problems compared to what they used to be in the 70s.
They are different problems. They're not minuscule. They're different problems. They are. And back a generation, jobs were easier to get.
You reckon?
You couldn't go to university, but you could get jobs that didn't require you to go to university.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Almost every job
there was massive unemployment when Thatcher came into power in 1979. Yes. There were no jobs, actually. Absolute rubbish. You might remember the reason that the Thatcher policies worked so well was because there was a very famous poster come up with by the Saatchi brothers, Labour isn't working. And it was a huge picture of people standing outside a labour exchange, as they were called then, because there were millions of people unemployed.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, again, different issues and different problems.
But you can't say one thing, Matteo, which is wrong, and then just make out as it's something different. You're wrong. There were no jobs back then. There are more jobs now. There is more money available now. There's a much greater disparity of money being trickled down to all sorts of people.
There's more money available now that's worth less. I mean, it's clear that
it's worth less.
For the past 10 years, real wages has gone down. So, yes, people have more money, but if the money that you have buys less,
I don't agree. I don't agree.
I mean, this was on full fact. I mean, it's a fact that real wages have gone down in the last 10 years. So for your pound, your £1 goes less.
Well, I see a lot more when I go to the airport. I see a lot of young people taking flights to various places around the world where they seem to be going on constant. Oh, because it's cheaper to fly places. Oh, right. Sorry, I thought you said it was more expensive.
No. Real wages have gone down. So the cost of flying around the world has also gone down. The cost of buying a car has also gone down. The cost of many things has actually gone down, and so it all evens itself out in the end. Well, not really. People are using food banks more now.
Oh, rubbish!
You can take
people are using more food banks now because there are food banks. That's where there weren't food banks in the 1970s because nobody had food banks in the 1970s. No. But I'm sure if they'd opened a few, people would have gone there and got food. You know, these are all left-wing shibboleths, Matteo.
Well, this is what's surprising about this whole study is that how old are you, Matteo, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 26.
So 26. So this is what I'm finding surprising about this study, because it's talking about your generation, who are thinking that the Thatcherite policies were a good thing, as compared to Jeremy Corbyn's. And all I hear from your generation is pretty much what you've been saying this morning. And, you know, I just think you do feel a bit entitled to everything, your generation, whereas you go back a couple of generations, we didn't think we were entitled to anything. We just got on with it.
Well, I mean, I think that's like... I mean, no, we don't feel entitled.
But you do feel entitled because you feel entitled to a
Matteo,
house.
I've got a tweet here. I'd like to put it to you from David. He says, ask your caller, please, what phone does he use, what laptop does he have, and where did he spend his last holiday?
Well, okay. I mean,
What phone you got?
I've got a Samsung phone.
Samsung, right, okay. How much does that cost you?
Samsung, about £400 odd pound.
What?
Give or take. £400 odd pounds.
400 quid for a phone, okay. What about laptop? What you got?
Laptop is a Microsoft.
Microsoft laptop? How much does that cost?
Microsoft, it's for work. It was about £1,000.
About £1,000? Okay.
Yeah.
And where did you spend your last holiday?
Italy.
Italy? Very nice. Tuscany?
No, Venice.
Venice.
Which
Sinking,
is
you know.
underwater. Matteo,
Listen,
we're holding you
Matteo, here's the thing. The point is that you've got a pretty nice life, right? Now, you may think of yourself as privileged in the job that you've got, but many people are like you. You know, you are very similar to every other 26-year-old who is currently in this country in the middle-class situation, who has a life which, if you were to go back to the 70s, mate, you would not believe how awful it was. You just wouldn't believe it. And it's not a question of things being different and things being harder for you, which weren't hard for us.
No.
It's the fact that Margaret Thatcher actually created the society that you are currently benefiting from. And whether you like that or not, that's where we are.
I'm not disagreeing that Margaret Thatcher didn't do policies that benefited us in the long run. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. And what I'm saying around that study, actually, you know, what young people seeing with regards to Margaret Thatcher's policies and looking at her in a positive way, and then also supporting Jeremy Corbyn, for me, makes perfect sense.
What has Jeremy Corbyn actually ever done for young people, really? He talks a lot about doing stuff,
but then never
actually does anything.
Yeah. He has no policy, really. No. And we know, Matteo, and anyone who studies politics will know, and will tell you, as you will probably know, that Jeremy Corbyn is a sort of a man who is wearing somebody else's suit. First of all, he doesn't like to wear suits, but he's wearing one. And it's not just the suit that he's pretending to wear. He's pretending to wear policies that he doesn't agree with. For example, he is a massive Brexiteer. He would have been if he could get his truth out there, but he's not allowed to admit that. You know, he would like to nationalise every single industry in this country if he could. He's not allowed to say that. Do you know what I'm saying? I think people don't see him as a sort of positive politician in any way, shape or form because he can't tell the truth.
I mean, with the Brexit thing, I definitely agree with it. I think he didn't really campaign or stand up for the Remain or the Leave side. Everything he sort of stayed on the edge a little bit, sort of wondering where the wind blows. Yeah. But I would say with Jeremy Corbyn, it's not so much necessarily his policies. I mean, he hasn't done much in the sense that he's been in opposition for his entire time as the Labour leader. But he represents change. He represents someone that is, at least in the surface, looking like he wants to make the situation better for millennials.
Yeah, but that's the problem. You keep saying he wants to make it better, but he doesn't say how he's going to do that. And that is the basic problem. But Matteo, listen, thanks very much indeed for your help. Matteo Bergamini, the CEO of Shoutout UK. Got a great one here from David. He says, tell these millennials that to imagine a 70s Britain, they should switch off their iPhones for 4 days a week and keep 50 full bin bags in their garden for a month. Which is a very good point. I mean, I remember walking through Leicester Square when the bin men strike was on, and the centre of Leicester Square, which any of you who have been there will know, is a massive sort of garden, effectively, with trees and grass and all that. It was piled, I kid you not, probably about 40 feet high, the whole place with bin bags and rats. Yeah. And I mean, you know, people who say, oh, well, young people have just got different problems now. Absolute balderdash. I'm going to say that word again.
Sorry, I think they are entitled. I did actually have a millennial tell me the other day that the 3-day working week we had in the 70s sounded quite good.
I'm sure it was good when you're on strike.
Exactly.
It's not so good when you're sitting at home with your children, right, sitting there by candlelight, wrapped in blankets because you can't put the heating on. Which is what we were doing. We all had to sleep in the same bed. Margaret Thatcher saved Britain. There is no doubt about that. You can argue that you didn't like the way she saved Britain, but she saved Britain. Britain. She gave people like me and my sister the opportunity to get jobs that we never would have got
Yes,
under
absolutely.
any other leader at that particular time,
Yes.
at that particular moment in history.